The August 4th, 2021 public hearing for the City of Tampa's Architectural Review Commission. Welcome everyone. My name is Zachary Greco, Chair of the Commission. If you're here to present a project, you will have limited time to make your presentation, so we suggest being thorough but concise. When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Your project should be presented in the following order: site plan, elevations, architectural details, and wall sections. Staff will then present the staff report, and we will then ask for public comment. Following your presentation, the commissioners will begin asking questions in the same order as the presentation. Please state and spell your name clearly if you are here to speak for or against a project. Your time will be limited to 3 minutes, so take some time now to summarize your comments, because 3 minutes go by very quickly. Following public comment, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed. The only comments which will be allowed after the public hearing is closed will be in response to any questions from the commissioners. The commissioners will then discuss the case and will make their decision based upon City Ordinance Chapter 27 of the City Zoning Code, the design guidelines, the Secretary of the Interior standards, the Historic Preservation Development Review HPDRC comments, and the testimony given at this public hearing. The ARC can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owner and agents are independently responsible to obtain any appropriate permits and/or approvals. If you haven't done so already, please silence all cell phones. And at this point, I'll ask my fellow commissioners to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Brent Taylor, I'm a building contractor.
Susan Cloud-Smith, architect and vice chair.
Stephen Sutton, architect. I also hold the architectural historian chair.
We're joined here tonight by city staff, Ron Vila, Elaine Lund, Beverly Jewisek, and Komari Pettis-Mackel with the City's Attorney Office.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Under announcements, we have none. Moving down to on our agenda, legal counsel will address the board at this time, dealing with conflicts of interest and ex parte communication.
Good evening. I'm Maria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. Will the commissioners please state whether or not they have any conflicts of interest regarding any of the items that are listed on the agenda?
None.
I have none.
Additionally, will the commissioners please state whether or not they've had any ex parte communication regarding any of the items that are listed on the agenda?
None.
I have none.
I have none.
Thank you.
Thank you. This time we'll move to the swearing. Everybody who wishes to testify, please stand up and raise your right hand, including staff. If you give me 1 minute, I see some people outside, and let me see if I can get them to come in.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing this evening is the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
The first case this evening is ARC 21-381. This is for the address of 839 South Newport Avenue. This is in the Hyde Park Historic District. The primary structure dates back to 1912, which is a contributing structure. The zoning classification is RS 60. The request is this evening is for an addition of approximately 1,100 square foot. The architectural style of the primary structure is Colonial Revival. On page 3 of your staff report, under previous actions, it's illustrated here that in 1993, they erected an accessory structure with some variances attached. Moving to the photo presentation. Is the Sanborn on everybody's monitor? Could the booth please bring up the Sanborn?
It's showing on our monitors.
Thank you. Highlighted in the green shaded area is the property in question at 839 Newport. Newport is the front-facing street. There is an alley to the rear that runs north and south. As you continue to the west, you have Willow as a point of reference, and then Morrison to the south. You see the grand wraparound porch that was period appropriate to this house when it was constructed, And the wraparound porch is a character-defining feature that's still there in its original state. This is an overhead shot. You see the primary structure. It has a very distinctive tile roof that we'll get into a little bit through the presentation, and then the detached accessory structure to the rear. This is looking at the front facade. You'll see some defacing of the pilasters that are here. The current owner is going to get into that through his brief description with the board. But here's a portion of the porch and how it wraps around. This is the north elevation. The area in question for the addition will be received in this back corner, not very visibly seen from the right-of-way. The abutting house to the north is a Tudor-style home, so you get a feeling of the neighborhood. Going back to the primary structure, you could really appreciate the wraparound porch and the second story, how it's back from the facade on the first floor. This is the drive aisle leading to the two-story accessory structure. This is the distance between the primary structure and the detached accessory structure. Sometimes there's a pinch point there, but has a very generous yard. This is the accessory structure as you get closer into the parcel. This is looking at the accessory structure from off the alley. And the rear of the primary structure. Once again, there's a lot of vegetation here. The addition is going to go more to the north and to the rear of the property. Just to conclude with the photo presentation, looking at the condition of the alley so you understand some of the pressures of the surrounding areas. That concludes the photo presentation. At this time, the owner and or the agent can approach the podium and address the board.
Good evening. My name is David DeVoisen. I am the owner of 839 South Newport. Just by way of quick introduction, I am married with 2 kids and have grown up in the Tampa Bay area over the last 30 or so years. And my wife and I have always been in love with the Hyde Park neighborhood due to the old historic architecture that's seen throughout. And when we found this home back in March, we were very excited. We were able to close on it and bring our family down to live here and expand this into the home that we want it to be for the next 25 years or so. Lucky for me, my in-laws live down the street on Edison. They're actually here tonight and just recently renovated their home and kept with all of the historic architecture and nature of the details of their home. So across the two of us, we're very interested in keeping with the historic nature of all these homes in Hyde Park. Sidebar, they just won Lawn of the Month this month at 717 South Edison, so feel free to swing by. And you know, what's important to know, Ron just mentioned this, is that when we had purchased the home, the previous owner had painted over all of the brick pilasters around the home, which you can see here. And you know, in an effort to keep with the historic nature of the home, we elected to spend the money and bring it back to its original beauty in the original brick, which you can see here. So the work is about 90% done, and you know, I think it's just important to note that we're here to support the ARC, to support the historic district, and with this addition, we want to make sure that we're complying with all the rules and regulations, and you know, make sure that while it is an addition, that we adhere to, you know, the appropriate guidelines for this neighborhood and this home in particular. Okay, I'll take the plans. You have them? Thank you. Okay, this is the site plan of the home. You can see the outline of the existing structure right here.
There's another microphone on the other side, right where that,
I'll use this one. This is the hashed area is the addition that we're proposing for the home. One of the things I want to first point out is that the elevation and location of the north wall here, this 11-foot distance, is keeping with the exact same sight line of the existing home. So from the street, you won't see any change in sight line from the original structure to the addition. We're just calling out here the mechanical units. These are covered by shrubbery. They are not visible from the street. And then on the south side, we have set back the home the 6 inches that are required by the ARC and the local code to make a clear demarcation from the existing home to the new structure. Also important to note that the roof lines and the soffits from the new house to the addition are consistent, and you will not see a break in any of the soffits or roof lines on the north or south ends. And then on the back, as requested, we've added these double doors with a porch and steps down to the rear yard. This is a floor plan of the ground floor. You can see the notch here, the 6 inches that I noted in the previous site plan. And then again, the elevation and sight line of the existing home structure to the addition are concurrent here. And what we're trying to do is, this home has a proper formal living room when you walk in, a nice dining room, but as it exists, there wasn't a large family room and kitchen to accommodate a family of 2, possibly 3 one day. And we've added on a generous family room here with a nice eat-in kitchen and a nice kitchen island that I think will really make this a spectacular home for our family. This is a floor plan of the second floor. Again, existing home at the setback notch, 6 inches on the south side here. Keeping in the sight line of the north side, the same concurrent, the elevation goes straight up from the ground floor to the second floor. And what we've done here is we've expanded the second floor to include a master bathroom, a master bedroom, and a walk-in closet, in addition to a much-needed laundry room for the house. Okay, this first elevation picture is the east elevation. This is the front of the house. There are no changes to the front of the house from the street level. What you see now is remaining. The only change, as I noted in the beginning of the presentation, is that we are stripping the brick of the paint from the previous owner to restore all of the brick to the original state it was in 100 years ago. This is the south elevation. Again, this is the existing home with no additions shown here. There are no, this is, let me get the second elevation. This is the proposed addition from the south. What you see here, the existing home ends, this is the 6-inch notch that I showed you in the site plan, and then the same roof and soffit line coming across. No change there. In the initial elevation that you saw, this soffit at the rear of the home will need to be removed, and we're going to replace it back with the addition. So the roof structure itself, while it's expanding, the architecture of it will remain the same as it exists now. And then we've added 4 windows on the south elevation. These 2 are in the family room, and then these 2 windows on the second floor are for the bathroom, the master bath. This is an existing elevation of the house from the north. This is the proposed addition from the north. Demarc from the addition, from the old house to the new addition is where my pen is here. These two windows on the second floor in the master bedroom, the two windows at the bottom are in the eat-in kitchen area. And again, same comments on the roof line, soffit line coming across remaining the same, and the addition of the soffit roof piece at the west elevation will remain the same. The picture at the top of the page here is the existing home. There's a little Juliet balcony that will be removed and replaced with these three windows that you see here. We're adding 4 French doors, 2 operable at the ground floor level with windows flanking either side, a little roof eave over the 4 windows in the rear, and then a porch step coming off of the rear of the home to access the rear yard. And then the final 2 photos I have for you are the bird's eye view of the roof lines. So this is the home as it exists today. And then this shows the addition of the roof lines, maintaining the sight lines and the soffits on the north and south elevations, and replacing the architectural roof detail on the west side when we replace the roof.
Good evening. My name is Hal Rasna. I'm the contractor for the job by the name of Harold James Builders. I'm basically here just to go over some of the elements that are important on the wall sections. The wall section on the exterior that is very important to this house for a couple reasons. The tile on this roof is a little bit different than we've seen before. I have a picture of it for you here. But as I just go through the wall section, what I wanted to point out to you was the roof is going to be matching exactly as you see it. I'm going to have a sample of the roof. We found a manufacturer that actually has this roof, which is pretty fortunate. We have extensive bracket system underneath this house on the soffits, over 2.5 feet, which I'll show you a picture of in a minute. With beadboard, it's very extensive. Of course, the window moldings are going to have the same 5/4 by 4.5 inch wood casing around all of them, and the actual top of the window will have its bed molding or small crown. And the siding will be the Dolly Varden siding that is mitered on the corners. It's not, does not have any trim on the end, on the corners of the house. And we do have a small, we'll have a 10-inch board below the siding before the crawl space, and then we have brick on the crawl space that we're going to reproduce. So I'd like to just show you a few pictures of this, and I don't know if you want to see a sample or not of the roofs, which I happen to have one of the parts, but in actuality here, but that's what we're going to be duplicating. It's a flat tile roof with 2 concave areas in it that interlock, and quite unusual. I'm not sure how to show it to you, but this is exactly what we can have reproduced and put on the new section of the house, as well as the new dormer on the top of the roof line that we're taking off and putting back on was for the attic, as well as the caps on all the ridges. That's probably the best picture I could get. I apologize for that, but that's on the porch. Here's a picture of the soffit. These are pretty elaborate. We're going to reproduce each one of them. About every 2.5 feet on center with the crown molding. And underneath the roof, you'll see crown, a decorative crown underneath the roof on the overhang up there also in this area here, right here. Again, there's the original back of the house. Very extensive all the way around, but that will be reproduced as well as the B-board. And let's see, got more of it here. There's that notch that's in the existing house right now. We intend to kick out the notch back here again for the addition and bring it back to match what you see here exactly. So it'll just follow along down here, the roof line. And here is pretty typical of your window. You have the 5/4 true wood. It's the siding butts to it, and this, the siding is underneath it. You have the bottom windowsill itself, which is a true 2-inch, which will be duplicating all wood on site. And you have your siding, which is important. Little difficult to do, but it's a nice part of the house. I like the mitered corners, which we're going to duplicate as we go. And let's see, this is the bottom. It's not quite a good picture, but there's the bottom frieze board down there. I think I may have a better picture of that. Not a frieze board, but the board above the, where is it? There it is right there. Okay. Right about in here, you have this board that we're going to have to duplicate with the drip cap on it. And let's see, as far as lighting, we have some lighting up front that I think, I'm sorry, here's the other one. This is the board I was looking for. A little bit better presentation. You've seen this before. This is your board above the crawl space and your drip cap there, the siding line. The house has got, right now, currently, which I'm not so sure was existing at the time, but that's lighting. Looks more like a mission style to us, but we are going to be looking for a little more period correct, or we can duplicate that, depending on what the board feels is appropriate on that. And also goes with the hardware of the doors. The only 2 doors were French doors we're putting in. We want to replicate what's on the house right now, or get something very close to the oval, and the doors will have that on it also. And we'll get these actually restored. So that's really all I got. We have brick going down underneath the crawl space. That's done in a pattern. I think, David, you may have that picture. Oh, no, I have it. It's not that clear. It's a pattern that is a basket weave pattern that we're going to duplicate in real brick. And I have a sample of that here. We happen to have the same brick that they used back then. This is part of the brick that we had to clean up, actually. So we're going to be using the same style of brick and color. And I think that is it for all the important exterior components of the project. So I thank you.
Thank you. At this point, staff will present the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Avila, staff with Historic Preservation. The request in front of you this evening is for a certificate of appropriateness for new construction for an addition to the primary structure. Staff's finding that this application is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines, and the plans that we reviewed were July 16th, 2021. At that time, on page 4 of your staff report, staff had some concerns. One was the location of the mechanicals, and it showed on the site plan there on the north elevation, shielded from the public view. For him to go through a wall section completely from the ridge all the way to the foundation, which was completed this evening. The rear elevation, they had a gang of doors there that didn't have any covers over it, and through discussion, they put a small visor over that with some brackets to shield it from the elements. Staff feel that is consistent with the rear elevation. And then it was lacking some windows on the second floor on the south elevation, and they've incorporated some windows to balance that elevation. Having said that, they delineated the addition. On the driveway side, they bumped it out in 6 inches. On the north elevation, they bumped it out, but is consistent with the bump out on that side. They did not go any more proud to the property line than what's already established historically. That completes the staff report, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. At this point, we'll open the hearing to any public comment who would like to speak for or against. All right, seeing, hearing none. We'll move to the commissioners being able to ask questions. Would a commissioner like to begin?
I would like to begin. Could you go over the materials of the overhang at the rear doors and also the material of the steps coming out of that new addition?
Yes, the overhang will be consistent with the rest of the house. We're going to have beadboard. You have that diagram? I think it's, okay, might have been in here. Might be best if we get into that. Oh, there's the picture of the brick. It will have a bracket, 2 brackets, 6x6 brackets to support it. It's freestanding, and it'll be barrel tile roof also. And here's a picture of, let's go back to that a minute. It'll have bracket system similar to, I do not have a side cross section of that, but it'll be your typical side angled bracket system that you would see in Hyde Park with barrel tile roof, beadboard understructure.
Is that actually barrel tile or flat tile, like
I'm
the
sorry,
remaining house?
it is flat tile.
Okay, and then the brackets are open, not closed?
Correct,
Like the one on the side elevation?
that's
Okay.
correct.
And then, so, because you're saying beadboard, I assume that means it's a flat plane, correct?
It'll be tongue and groove.
Okay. And then in terms of the steps that are coming out, what material?
We are going to be using wood 5/4 pressure treated material.
Okay.
So, while we have you up here, I know you discussed in detail the nature of the window and door details in terms of their framing and how they sit in the wall, but I don't recall you presenting to us a specification or a cut or a methodology on the new windows and doors that you're being able to put into place. Have you decided how you're going to go about those? Are you going to have them custom fabricated, or are they going to be pre-manufactured, or what's that situation going to be like?
Okay. The windows are going to be wood windows made by Sierra Pacific. They're custom made for the home with the exact divided lights. And there'll be double hungs. I can provide a cut sheet for that. I do not have that with me, but and the door will be the same. It's going to be a gel one door, all wood, 7 foot high. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to ask another question respecting your roof tile. Not necessarily as a choice, but obviously in this condition, a majority of the existing roof tile on that back side of the house is going to be coming off. Is it your intention to reuse as much of that as possible and perhaps interleave it with your new tile?
We intend to weave in what we have there, preserve what we have there, and then go ahead and use the new to mix in. Yes,
Okay, so you're going to try to mix it up as much as possible?
correct.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't have any additional questions.
I have none either.
I have two questions. First question, so you discussed the brick being around the foundation. The crawl space, is that open at all, in which case there's going to be any sort of screen enclosure or any sort of, lattice work or anything?
The crawl space, again, I just found the picture. The house currently has a mix of solid brick towards the back, right about here. This is the back of the house. It's got a solid brick. Oops, sorry, very little ventilation, which needs to be added into the new. You can hardly see that. The brick that is up front is an open style that I felt would be more appropriate in the back. It would allow for ventilation and look a little more appropriate. And we don't intend to use lattice work back there.
So what will you use to cover the areas that have the ventilation?
We would do a screen, a custom wood screen insert.
Okay. And then the only other question I have is, we could go to your, believe it was your north elevation.
Okay. I have it here somewhere, north elevation. Okay. And the new addition?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you have it. Okay, I'm sorry.
If we could zoom out just a little, thank you. Keep going. All right, so question refers more towards the new windows that are on the back portion or the right side of the new addition.
Correct.
So it looks like you are drawing the sort of the overall dimensions from the windows that's in that setback and not the windows that are on sort of the front portion. On the second floor, it looks like all the windows are on the same dimension in terms of the height.
That's correct.
Is there a rationale, because I believe it's the same thing on the south side, was there a rationale of why you went with a smaller window instead of a taller one? Is there a programmatic piece that's restricting it, or is it just more of?
It was just the aesthetic, I believe, when my architect was looking at it. Johnny, would you be able to answer that question a little bit?
Could you?
Can you get to the microphone?
Sorry.
There might be a built-in bench or some sort of seating in there.
I think you're referring to the bathroom windows that were on the opposite side of the house.
No, well, on this one, if I'm correct, this is where like the dining area is on the right side under the new addition on the first floor. So just wondering the rationale behind. Yep, so those two windows match the two windows that are to the left of it, whereas
I see.
the front
Yeah.
windows are taller. So I was just curious, was there a reason that you
Those-
decided to match those, or?
Yeah, we were trying to maintain the aesthetic of the service areas of the house. Those two windows above the air conditioning units are the kitchen area. So we were maintaining that line because that goes into the breakfast nook area.
Okay.
Sir, can you put your name on the record, please?
I'm Johnny Moore. I'm the residential designer.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for either staff or applicant? Okay. At this point, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for a rebuttal. Do you need a rebuttal or anything? No. Okay. All right, we'll close this portion. Could you just come to the microphone, I guess, and
No rebuttal.
all right, thank you. At this point, we'll close the public hearing. The commissioners can now discuss the case. Is there a commissioner that would like to begin?
I have no comment, no issues. Okay.
Would a commissioner like to, or Commissioner Sutton?
The only comment I wish to have is, at first glance, I'm a little bit put aside that we're looking at such a large addition to really quite a well-proportioned house, that I think the handling of its detailing and its placement is quite sympathetic to that existing house. So I have a feeling that a lot of my concerns are going to really disappear because that fabric is being maintained in a very sensitive manner. But still, I find it, quite a large addition. But that's my only complaint.
Okay.
It is a large addition, but the way it's designed, I agree.
It's well
You're
handled.
gonna be able to tell that it was an addition 50 years from now, but it's also going to be done in a way that aesthetically it's appealing and will be for the next 100 years.
I agree. I agree with that. I think it's going to work out just fine eventually. I think by the time it's all done and the landscaping gets to grow back in, you probably wouldn't even know this project happened.
Okay.
Except someone has to pay for it.
Would a commissioner or a commissioner like to make a motion?
I move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in case ARC 21-381 for the property located at 839 South Newport Avenue, because based upon the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons: that the scaling and massing as well as materials are consistent with the guideline.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Moving to the next agenda item, which is ARC 21-363. This is for the address of 2101 West Marjorie Avenue. This is also in the Hyde Park Historic District. The primary structure dates back to 1923. In 1988, when staff was going by and doing a survey of the area, this house was modified greatly. Since then, and through my tenure working with the city, little by little, this house has been brought back. It's a one-story craftsman-style home that had many modifications to it, and little by little, with the help of this board, is coming back to its original luster. So it is a non-contributing structure currently. The zoning classification is RS60, and the request this evening is for new construction, addition to the primary structure with some site improvements. On the monitor, I usually like to start with the 1929 Sanborn map. This is a corner parcel, which is indicated in the shaded green area. It's on the corner of Albany, that runs north and south, and Marjorie, that runs east and west, and Marjorie dies into Howard Avenue as a point of reference. There is an alley to the rear. The accessory structure is not there, and if you look at the footprint of the structure, and as we go through the photos, you'll see that the footprint that was established in 1929 is not the footprint today, so it's been modified. Looking from above, you see this little notch here, and that's what I was referring to, that the footprint has been changed. Once again, you have Albany and Marjorie, corner parcel. This is a portion of the porch that still remains open. This was the original house, and then this bump out was added on sometime that preceded, 2000. Continuing with the photos, just looking at a different angle of the front facade that faces Marjorie. This is the property to the west, down Marjorie. This is the, that shares a common property line. This is looking down Albany. This is that addition that was done some time ago, and the perimeter fencing. Try to get a shot of the area in question where the addition is going to take place. It is a corner element and rear. This is looking at the rear. So once again, you have the primary house that is delineated by the gables. You have this portion that was added on, and then you have this hip that was added on some time ago as well. Just looking at the rear elevation again. This is the parking structure. That is just right off the alley, but they come in off of Albany. And this is Albany here, and this is looking at the entrance to that parking element. That concludes the photo presentation, and at this time, the agent can address the board. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Missy Shoecraft, and I represent the owners Flavia Bravo and Jason Pill. As Ron described, this is on a corner lot. The lot itself is 57 by 139 feet, and it is in the RS60 zone. It is a Craftsman, and as Ron has mentioned, there have been a number of additions onto this house over time. Most significantly, the front of the house had that bump out put on. Our project would be to remodel a portion of the inside and then do an addition on the back of the house. This is a non-contributing building, which is rare in Hyde Park now for a freestanding residential home to be non-contributing, so it leaves it vulnerable to demolition. The board doesn't have to grant permission for a non-contributing, but this family has no intentions of doing that. What they want to do is keep it and grow their family. In fact, after this, in a couple years, you'll probably see me again for a 2-story accessory structure to get rid of the aluminum carport in the back and a pool. But for now, we're going to focus on just making the house a little more livable for them. Presently, the master bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom were all kind of jammed into a rear, we don't even know if it was a screen porch, but it's fairly uncomfortable. The ceiling height is 7 feet. Thank you. So here we are. Here's Marjorie. It is a corner lot, and the bump out that was added on was this piece here, probably in the early 2000s. It is a long lot. It's 139 feet long by 57 feet wide, and our proposed project is here in the rear. Try to delineate with color what is being remodeled on the inside. That is that portion that I was saying is 7 feet height, ceiling height, very small. And then the idea is to expand the kitchen, add a small mudroom, and do a master bedroom suite on the first floor. The existing house itself currently has 2 bedrooms, so this would be now a 3-2 is what we would have on this house with the addition. So here's the existing portion of the home that's going to be remodeled. As you can see, there's a small kitchen, then there's a small bathroom, and then a laundry area that connects to the existing master. So that's one of the original bedrooms, and they want to keep that. And then the addition remodels a portion of the space and extends it by about 7 feet for a proper kitchen. Eat-in kitchen with a laundry, a powder bath, and then over here, a master bedroom suite that has French doors that open into a side yard, the bedroom, the closet, and then a master bathroom. So beginning with the front elevation, just to remind you that the bump in the back is about,
I'm sorry, but these are really light, so it's very hard to see any.
I know, I
Discern-
have the original drawings here, Ron has them,
Okay.
if we need to break them out. From the front of the house, there's really no material change. The bump out is about 65 feet from the front elevation of the house. On the side, this is the side that includes the master bedroom bump out, so there's no work being done on this portion of the house. And then we have 2 windows in the master bedroom, 1 window in the closet, and then a window in the 2 windows in the master bathroom. These might be better. Let me repeat that. These are better. So there's the existing front. And then this is the elevation that faces the cross street. That's the existing condition showing that enclosed porch area that has a very low ceiling. And then this is the longest portion of the addition here that shows the steps, which are going to be Trex, the windows in the master bedroom, closet, and master bathroom. This is the elevation on the back of the house currently. Kind of a mishmash of windows. Don't really know when that was enclosed. And then this is the proposed rear elevation, which shows the end gable, which would have the same vent and bracket as on the front of the house, a door to the mudroom, French doors into the kitchen, and then a pair of windows over a counter. This is the existing west elevation. These were not original. And like I said, this is that portion that has the very low ceiling, which is currently where the kitchen is. And what we would like to do, of course, is to have a more functional kitchen, and then that's the end of the master bedroom in the distance. In terms of the materials proposed, this is a product that we've used many times in Hyde Park. It's the Geldwin Auralast wood windows, single or double hung, and also for the rear doors. There's a pair of French doors on the rear, a pair of French doors off the master, and then 1 pedestrian door that goes into the mudroom. So we would propose the Geldwin Auralast for both the doors and the windows. For the roof, we would propose to use the Owens Corning Duration Single Series, and that's actually what's on the house right now. We're going to try to match as closely as possible the color, even though the roofing has faded over time. We may end up re-roofing the whole thing. This is a typical drawing of the detail that we would put on this house.
Could you zoom out just a little bit? Sorry.
Zoom out.
Yes, ma'am.
How's
Thank you.
that? Better? Okay. And this is very, very typical of a very sort of simple craftsman detail on so many of the houses in Hyde Park. We have not made a lighting selection because at this time there is no exterior lighting on the house. But we were thinking of using something a little more craftsman-y for the exterior hardware. Again, as I said, this family really wants to improve the house, and I've worked very hard on the interior of most of it. This is a photograph of the existing wood siding. Simple, nothing fancy. This is a photograph of a typical window with the corner board, the detail around the windows. The brackets are, the rafter tails are 2x8s. And then the soffit is a tongue and groove, which we would recreate. So that's a photograph of the typical bracket and vent, which we would use on all the gable ends that we are building. When they did this addition, they did not do that, and we would not recreate that. And then this is a photograph of the tongue and groove soffit, and you can see the rafter tails. So essentially, we are requesting to add on 450 square feet to this property. As staff noted, the staff findings are that the application is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines, and I would like to add for the following standards. We believe that the scale and the width and the height of the addition is consistent with other buildings in the block and in the area. The massing and the building form has a very typical relationship to houses in Hyde Park, particularly on the corner lots. The setback is consistent with the properties in Hyde Park, including the building itself. The orientation and site coverage, we believe, is consistent as well. It's not overwhelming to the site at all. It's a fairly modest addition. The alignment, rhythm, and spacing of the building is very typical to other craftsman buildings on corner lots. The use of materials that we're using are the materials that would originally have been used on this property, with the exception of the Trex board on the rear deck. And that's just because we find that the pressure treated just does not last. It becomes a problem very quickly. All the trim and detail is going to match the existing condition, and by that I don't mean the addition, I mean the original portions of the house that have been recreated over time. The window patterns, we believe, and the proportions are relative to the overall size of the addition. The roof form is consistent with the existing roof form. It's a gable. And we would hope to maintain the quality of the design, detailing, and execution of the new construction in this building, as we've tried to do in the past. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. At this point, staff will present the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Avila, staff with Historic Preservation. This is for ARC 21-363. The request is for a certificate of appropriateness, addition to the primary structure. Staff find this application is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines. We did have some conditions that were associated with page 3 of the staff report. The applicant went through the majority of these conditions. I think additional discussion is required for the rear fenestration. The windows seem a little small. She had discussed that there's some internal parameters on the western portion of the rear, but additional discussion on the smaller windows on the eastern portion on that rear elevation. Have the agent discuss the tie-in of the roof lines, or if she has a roof plan that she could show this evening, and also how the siding is going to terminate into the foundation. Is this on piers, or are there brick piers, or is there a stem wall, to provide additional information at that portion as well. I'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this point, we'll open the hearing to any public comment. Okay, seeing and hearing none, we'll move to the commissioners asking questions. I just wanted to start off, did you have any wall sections?
I did, and I forgot to present.
Okay, could you maybe run through the wall sections first, just so we can run through those and then we can ask any additional questions? Thank you.
And also, while I'm here, it's a continuous foundation that's wrapped in brick. There are no piers. And the ventilation is done by piercing of the brick, you know, when they... So it's a continuous foundation that has a brick facing on it. The wall is a 2x6 to give you that depth that you need for the windows in particular. The siding, as I said, is just a regular 5-inch wood cedar siding. The overhang is 2 feet, and that's consistent all the way around the house. All elevations are 2 feet deep. It's a tongue and groove soffit, and the raptor tails are 2x8. The roof, as I discussed, is going to be placed over the existing roof with that Owens Corning shingle.
Would a commissioner like to ask any additional questions?
Sir, yes, please, may. Ms. Rucraft, if you would please pull up your west, no, I take it back, your east and your north elevations, please.
East and north? Yes.
I have some questions for a couple of windows.
East.
Let's start with this one, please. We go to your addition, and we go all the way to the north portion of this addition, and I see 2 windows, one large and one very, very small, in sufficient proximity to each other to be effectively ganged. And I find that combination a little bit disconcerting because of one size versus the other. I do note that there are gang windows on the existing building, but they're of the same size. I understand also the programmatic nature as to why we have a larger and a smaller window in this general location. Is there a possibility where you might be able to produce a greater separation between these 2 windows so that there would be enough space between them so as they would not so appear to be ganged and ungangly because of their different sizes?
Yes, we could do that. The larger window could be shifted to the south to give more separation. Alternatively, we could have 2 small windows that were adjoined. We could do either one.
Either one, okay.
Yeah.
So perhaps this might be an element for coordination with staff. But something's going to have to happen to these 2 windows,
Okay.
either by separation or of a convenient
Or
sizing that can be ganged together and make sense out of it. Because that's what's, this becomes a sore thumb element. Even though it's on the back, it is still on a street fronting area, and it will be seen and perhaps even noticed, and it looks like an error.
May I ask you a question about that?
Yes, ma'am?
So the window that's in the closet is slightly narrower than the other windows, and I think I would like to have them all the same size. So for example, the windows that are the 1/1s should really, I think, would be better if they were all the same size.
I think
That's
that-
easily done.
I would think that'd be a marvelous thing to do.
Okay.
This may not be a contributing structure, but between the owner and their work on the building to bring it up to Hyde Park standards and your work as well for this addition, I think even attention to those little minor elements makes a big difference here.
If I could real quick, so are we suggesting that between the 5 windows that are showing on this new elevation, the width of all of those will be the same?
What I would propose
Mhm.
is that, let's call it the third window.
Okay.
As you can see, it's slightly narrower. I would propose to have that window the same size as the ones on either side of it.
Okay.
Right? And then, really, it's the pleasure of the board. We could go 2 smaller windows that are ganged together,
Or greater space.
or greater spacing. I think my preference would be to do 2 smaller windows that are ganged together, but it's the pleasure of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Let's take a look again, please, onto your north side on this.
And I have go ahead, sorry.
Again, a window question on this. If you would zoom out just a little bit. Super. I understand the French doors. I understand your little window next to the French doors, but on either side are a pair of ganged windows. And I understand why they are short as a programmatic item. Is there a particular reason why they are of 2 different sizes?
The one to the left is actually over a tub,
Mm-hmm.
and it sits in between a shower compartment and a water closet.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to have a little bit of breathing room so that the trim on the inside wasn't sitting right onto the walls that would be coming perpendicular. The ones in the kitchen, which are the 2 to the right, those can actually be longer. They are going to sit on top of a counter. There will be no backsplash on the counter. So it's possible to make those 2 more in keeping with the rest of the windows in the house.
Would you consider actually using smaller windows and use 3 in a gang?
In the
kitchen?
Yeah, we have plenty of room there on that wall this way, is that there's a counter underneath it.
Because that way, all the basic windows would be of the same size, but in different combinations on that wall.
So you're suggesting perhaps the 2 windows that are in the bathroom, that size, making a triple in the kitchen?
I would think so.
Okay.
I think that would be a worthy coordination item with staff.
Would you be opposed to having windows that were longer, more in keeping with the rest of the house?
I understand the height for the tub. I understand the height for the kitchen counter. And I understand your desire to keep things as consistent as you possibly can as a sightline item. So that doesn't really bother me right
Okay.
here. I'd rather see them all the consistent nature in this small elevation, as keeping it in terms of the jewel box that it is, as opposed to having a wild variation between all the individual windows.
Okay. That's fine. We can certainly do a triple in the kitchen.
Thank you very much. That's all I have a question for the moment.
Commissioner Clausmith?
Come back to me, please.
Commissioner Taylor?
Will the trim boards around the windows and doors be a full 5-quarter board to the shadow line?
Yeah.
And then on the doors, the elevations show a divided light, whereas one of the detail sheet showed a solid glass.
That was just a specification for the Oralast. I think they haven't, the reason why they went with the French doors that have a divided light is that the existing French door has a divided light, but I don't think that they would fall on their sword on that at all. I think what they want is full glass, as much light as possible.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Boyd?
The existing structure's windows has little brackets at the top of each window. Will you be duplicating that detail?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's the only question I have.
If I may. Could you put your site plan back up on the monitor, please? Could you indicate where the mechanical units are? I don't think that you pointed those out before.
I didn't, I'm sorry. They're right here on the inside?
So they'll be inboard of the existing fence line?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Are there any other pieces of equipment that will be set out, like water heater or anything like that?
They are going to have a gas water heater, but we would propose to put it in on that same, like we call it the service area.
The service
Everything
side?
would get ganged together.
Okay.
Now someday, like I said, there will be a pool, and so we're going to have to figure out where to put the pool.
We won't worry about that now.
Just preparing you,
I'm sorry?
just preparing you. It's
That's
coming.
fine. I may not be here, who knows? There was a question from the staff report about a partial elevation showing the gable end at the secondary entrance. Do we know what that is related to? Do you know what that is related to?
Yes, I know what that is related to.
Could we look at that really quick? Because I don't remember.
I
if we-
would love to show it to you, but
But
I
you-
don't have
You
it.
do?
And I'm
Okay.
sorry, that is completely my mistake. What he was asking for is right here,
Oh, looking back that way?
looking back at that.
Okay.
And I'm happy to include it in the final ARC packet to staff for their final approval.
I would think that would be important, especially if the fence ever went away, because that's definitely an elevation that would be prominent along that edge of Francis. So we talked about that. We talked about that. Oh, in terms of the gable venting and any venting holes on the foundation, are there proposed screening elements or trellis elements, and are those actually, well, I know on the gable vent you said it was going to match, but are those actually working, or will they have blanked out elements behind them?
They will be, on the new construction, they
Yeah.
will be blanked out.
Okay, and that's the same on the foundation, if there are any venting?
The only venting is what we call the piercing, where certain bricks are left out in order to allow.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
And then what we do, excuse me,
Yeah.
is we screen behind that, keep
Right,
small things from.
understood. Okay. That is it for me. Thank you.
I only have one additional question. It's either for staff or for you. Our document says that there's, the CA is also for site improvements. Is that,
No, the only, there's a small deck on the back, and that's going to be a Trex deck
Okay.
or Trex-like. And then, of course, the locations of the mechanicals. But at this time, no, there are no additional improvements.
okay. Any additional questions for applicant or for staff? Okay, at this point, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for a rebuttal.
None.
All right, thank you. We'll close this portion of the public hearing and we can now discuss the case. Is there anything the commissioners would like to discuss?
Just wanted to say the comments that were given by Commissioner Sutton about the windows at the north and the west, I believe it was, were spot on. I do think it's, a conversation to be had with the owners ultimately to figure that one out. I think there's a couple of options and opportunities there, but I feel confident that based on the discussions with the agent that there's an understanding there, and obviously it being non-contributing as the client, the owner is of that mindset that whatever they can do to bring it back to some former condition is just to be lauded, and
I think all it really needs is a little tweak to their uniformity in terms
Yep.
of size
And there's
or their
options.
placement. And I think that can be entirely done as again, as you said, a point with the owner,
Mhm.
and as well as a coordination item with staff. Because there's nothing really fundamentally wrong that we see here today. It's just that little tweak to make it better.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Well, would a commissioner like to make a motion then?
I move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in ARC 21-363 for the property located at 2101 West Marjorie Avenue with the following conditions: that the east and north elevation windows be modified as discussed today and approved by staff, and that the elevation at the secondary entrance be provided and approved by staff. Because based upon the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons: that the orientation and site coverage as well as the trim and detailing is consistent with the guidelines.
I second the motion.
And then could the applicant go and just on record, just say that you understand the conditions, or if you have any questions?
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All in favor? Aye.
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 Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Moving to the next agenda item is ARC 21-390. This is for the address of 727 South Edison Avenue. This is also in the Hyde Park Historic District. The contributing structure dates back to 1915. This is a RS60 zoning classification. They're adding approximately 732 square feet. The request this evening is for new construction, addition to the primary with some possible site improvements for their certificate of appropriateness. There was some work that was done on page 3 of your staff report under previous actions. There was a demo of an existing contributing structure, accessory structure, and then some new construction in that area, and there was an addition to the primary structure on the southern portion of that structure. So moving to the Sanborn map. Once again, this is 1929. You see the fabric, a heavily populated area in 1929 with the yellow indicating frame construction. If you look in this immediate vicinity on the corner parcels, you see larger lots. This request has one of the larger lots. This is a very generous lot. It does have the wraparound porch to accept the corner, but a portion of the southern portion of the porch has been enclosed, and that will be evident in the photos that I'll show you. And then the new accessory structure, these were removed in an approximate location of the indication of the Sanborn map of the accessory structures are currently where the new accessory structure is. The request this evening is there's going to be addition. They have this generous yard to the north, and they're going to use a portion of that to do a one-story addition on that portion, and then behind that one-story addition that can be seen from Edison, which is the primary street, which will be the two-story volume behind it to kind of close in this notch that's back here. To orientate you, you have Swan to the north, which is one of the primary corridors in Hyde Park. You have Edison that runs north and south, and you have Inman to the south and Delaware to the west. This is the vicinity map just showing a general vicinity within the historic district of Hyde Park. The red is the local district, and this is just in the heart of Hyde Park. This is looking from above. See the primary structure here, the detached accessory structure, and then to respect, the presence of the sited of this house on this parcel, the addition is going to go towards the north. This is looking at the front elevation, very generous porch in depth and width. This is looking at the north elevation. There is a little patio area in the back that will be removed as part of this addition, so I wanted to provide you with some guidance. This is where the addition is going to go back here on this north elevation. This is looking at the abutting. This is the abutting property line. This is the abutting house to the north. Moving to the corner element, this is the wraparound porch. We left the railing when we enclosed the room with casements as our guidelines stipulate, but we left the balustrade so you can see the length of where the wraparound porch went to, and then it died into this last column. This was an addition, this was an addition, and then the accessory structure approved by prior board. This is looking at the detached accessory structure that has a connector. This is looking back at the primary structure with that breezeway. This is a portion of looking from Edison that I spoke about. This is that little patio area that's going to be removed, and the two-story volume will take place here. And the last picture is just showing the arcade that was part of the prior addition that kind of wraps around the rear, and then they have, you know, a pool in the back to entertain their friends and their family. That concludes the photo presentation, and Ms. Shoecraft will address the board.
My name is Missy Shoecraft, and I am the agent for the Upton family, who are the new owners of this property. By way of reference, my company did the addition and the accessory structure. I think we got it approved about 3 years ago. And so I'm pretty familiar with the property, and these are, as I said, new owners. Presently, the heated and air-conditioned space in this house is 3,400 square feet, and they would like to add 732 square feet, almost equally splitting it between the first and the second floor. And I wish Sean had stayed. He is the neighbor to the north. He said he liked it, but I can't represent him. So this is, do I need to? Okay. You shouldn't have as much trouble with these drawings.
The padding. Yep, you're off. Nope, you're off. Yeah, you're off.
Okay. So this is Inman, to orient you. This is Edison. As Ron mentioned, this is one of the largest lots in the neighborhood. It's actually more than a double lot. It's 127 feet, I believe, by 129. I can't quite read it, but 125 by 129, I believe. The house itself sits closer to Inman than it does, so it's almost like there's an equal size lot to the north, which is where we propose to put the addition. This is the accessory structure that my company built, as well as the mudroom, which I'll show you in more detail, and continuing that enclosed porch. But that was 3 years ago. On the site plan, this is the location of the first floor addition. This portion here is to enclose the existing covered area that was built about 10 years ago. So this house has had a number of additions on the back of the property. So to reiterate, this was actually the original footprint of the house. And this kitchen and this side porch and this covered porch was added, I'm going to say about 10 years ago, 3 owners ago. We came in and added this mudroom and enclosed this space. This was a deck, and we enclosed it and made the sun porch bigger and had custom windows made to match what was there already. Obviously, this was closed in at some time, and we don't know when, because it was a full-on wraparound porch. So our proposed work is going to take place by enclosing this covered porch, which was added about 10 years ago. We believe this was probably the original kitchen at one time, but currently it just functions as a sort of an extra room. All the AC units are here, and we would propose to move them over here behind a fence. And as Ron stated, there's no work in any of this area of the house. We're concentrating all the work in the northwest corner. This is the proposed plan, which would pretty much keep the kitchen in the same footprint, some minor changes, but one of the more significant ones is actually putting in 2 windows. This whole wall from here to here has no windows. So we wanted to add
I'm
windows.
sorry, could you zoom out just a little bit?
Yep,
Sorry, thank you.
you know my talent. A little more? Is that good?
That's good, thank you.
Okay, sorry. So we're proposing to put in 2 windows here. As I said, this is the portion of the house that was added on to, I'm going to say 10 years ago. This is the new, what we're calling the family room, breakfast area that is going to take the place of that covered porch, also added on 10 years ago. And then the true addition to the property is this section right here, where we're going to do an ensuite bedroom, bathroom, closet, and a small sitting area for the mother-in-law who's moving in with them. On the second story, for a house that has this really large footprint on the first floor, you can see it here, it's actually quite small for the relative to the scale of the house. At the moment, there's 2 bedrooms and a Jack and Jill, a laundry, a bathroom, a closet, and this currently functions as a bedroom because this is the old sleeping porch, which is in fairly dilapidated condition, and I'm not quite sure what the previous owners used that for because it's not heated and air conditioned. And so what we propose to do is to make some changes to the interior floor plan so that you would have an ensuite bathroom here, a second ensuite with a closet, so you still would have the 2 bedrooms, have an office, a closet, a master bath, and then a master bedroom. Again, trying to shift the focus of the massing into the northwest corner, keeping this corner in particular well clear. That's about 6 or 7 feet from the corner. This is a picture of the current front elevation. As Ron described, this portion here is the portion of the wraparound porch that was closed in. Again, we don't know when, but it wasn't done by us. And then these are the 2 additions that we would propose to put in. This being the first floor, this being the second floor of the master bedroom. Moving to the Inman elevation. Again, as I described before, this was an addition that I know of. This was the addition that came in at some point. This is the existing non-heated and air-conditioned. It has glass windows, but it's not very habitable. And what we would propose to do is try to recreate as much as possible the effect of a sleeping porch on that side of the house, even though it is a master bathroom and some of those windows are going to be closed off from the inside. But we are trying to recreate that feeling, the sort of the level of transparency that you would have on a sleeping porch. No changes to the first floor on this elevation. On the rear elevation, again, this is the addition that was done in 2003, the covered walkway, and this portion was done about 10 years ago. That's the upstairs sleeping porch. And what we would propose to do on the second floor, again, is to create the effect of a sleeping porch and then have the master to the side that is tucked behind this sleeping porch, which protrudes in front of it. So from Inman, there's not a clear view of that. You can certainly see it from the alley. And then you would see a portion of it from Edison. On the rear, we're adding the 2 windows in the kitchen as well as a pair of French doors to get as much natural light into that portion of the space. And as I mentioned, that's where the old covered porch was. Moving to the north, I can tell you right now that the location of the equipment, which is here now, is actually going to go here. However, we did not make that change. So there's a note there that says relocated equipment is going to go in here. So it's tucked away behind this first floor addition. So it will only be visible from the neighbor and possibly from the alley, but they have a fence. These are the 3 windows that are in the family room. These are 2 windows in the master. Again, this is the new roof line. One of the things that we tried to hold on to was that slope at the end of the roof as much as possible, pretty much all the way around on all the new roof lines to be consistent with what's there. And we have a better section. So in this section, this is also a foundation. It's basically a block foundation that's continuous with masonry veneer, but we do it right. We turn the corners if we need to. And again, this is the portion where we remove a certain bricks in a decorative pattern with screening behind it in order to get ventilation under the house. The walls are 2 by 6. There's the description, as I was trying to say, of the sort of the 3-foot sloping roof that changes pitch from the rest of it, which we're going to match the current fiberglass shingles with what's there now, with obviously what we would put on. The roof overhang is going to match the dimensions, the profile, and the fascia materials of what's there now. The overhang is 3 feet overall. There's a wood strip soffit to match the existing, and that's actually a beadboard soffit as opposed to the earlier project, which was tongue and groove. All the header trim to match the existing condition, and I have quite a few pictures of that. We have double hung wood windows. These are the Orlast Geldwen, which we've used very successfully in almost all our projects over the last 15 years. There's, as I mentioned, the running bond brick veneer over the footing, and the crawl space floor system matches all the existing house, so there's no change in elevation. So this is again the Genweld Orlast product, both for the doors and windows. The windows would be 1/1, just like the primary windows on the house. The decorative windows on the house are really the ones in the sun porch. I've got some photographs of the existing condition to show you what we would intend to match. So here's the beadboard soffit. There's a corner board here and novelty siding. I have a close-up of this detail. It's a little fancier than your blocky Craftsman trim. It actually has an extra piece on top, which you can see here. So most of them would end here, and then they have these 2 extra pieces of trim which we would match, though that material is readily available. If not, we can have it made. The lighting on the outside of the house, at the moment she's got, there's custom Bivolo gas lighting, and the intention is to continue that same lantern on the back of the house on the outside of the French doors, in particular on the first floor. And then this is again a better close-up of that fancy header trim on the windows and the novelty siding, which is all original to the house. I believe that's all I have right now.
Thank you. At this point, staff will present the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. The request this evening is for a certificate of appropriateness for an addition and new construction to the primary structure. Staff finds that this application is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines. The conditions were met this evening with one outstanding for discussion. The slope of the roofs change throughout the project, and I know to meet code, when you get lower than a 212 pitch, you have to go to a road roof or some kind of other material to meet code. So looking at the pitch of the roof, if the agent could address the different portions of that and how that's going to be finally discussed at the end. So I'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we will open the public hearing to any public comment. Would anyone like to speak for or against? All right, seeing and hearing none. The commissioners can now ask questions. Would a commissioner like to begin?
If you would please, I would like to start with the roof, but for a different purpose entirely. It seems that your various pieces of the addition have slightly varying roof pitches to them. And the big question I have is not so much the technical nature as to why, it's more of the design issue as to why. Because I would expect on a house of this scale, particularly fronting Inman and Edison, that an attempt to match existing roof pitches would be high on a list of items to coordinate and dovetail it from new to old. Do you have any comment onto that item in itself as to why your apparent addition roofs do not match the roof pitch of your existing building? Or am I reading it wrong?
No, you're not reading it wrong. We did, Commissioner Sutton, take a look at trying to match the original pitch of the main roof structure, but due to the dimensioning of some of the spacing, it didn't quite match exactly. Now, we can change that and have a steeper pitch. What I'm referring to specifically right now is the west elevation. If you look at the screened, the sleeping porch area, we could, not artificially, but we could change the pitch of that roof as well as the one over the master, so that it has a higher, so it's taller, to be more in keeping with the mother roof, the big one. That can be done.
I think that would help tremendously with the balance of what we're looking at.
And if I may, to answer Ron's question about the rolled roof, as you know, it's a code issue, and we would have to use a material that we would paint, essentially, to try to match the color of the roof as best possible. That section that's rolled is about 3 feet. Is what we would have to do from a code perspective. At least that's what I've been told. Or perhaps an alternative might be available. It all depends what you would use for your underlayment. As an example, in that particular location, or perhaps over the entire section of that roof, if you underlaid with a peel and stick, would that be sufficient for the purposes of protecting that and still allow you to put a shingle over it in order to maintain that consistency that you have on the remainder of the building? Because let's put it this way, if you're going to re-roof the whole of the building, you would be seeing that same issue all around the existing perimeter. We ran into that in the house that we're remodeling right now. So I would have to defer to my partner, who's the contractor, on what's the best way to do it. I think our goal was to continue that
I understand.
slope, because that for us was a very important feature of the house. But I can see that in conjunction with raising the pitch, we can try to even get closer to sort of that high-hat Victorian feel that the house has now.
I would like to see what you can do in that particular vein, because that is it's a very large home, and it has a very distinctive roof. And to deviate from it seems like an error, particularly with a small addition that you're proposing right here, because everything else works. The windows, the details to me, the siding, everything else works except that roof form.
I think that we can correct that pretty easily. Honestly, I'm not saying it's arbitrary, but we can increase the pitch of both of those sections on the back.
And it would still fit and dovetail to that roof.
Right, yeah. Okay.
That is all I have for the moment.
Just to satisfy my own thoughts in my head, can you keep this one up and put the south elevation next to them?
Side by side?
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully they're at the same scale, yes. So can I see the second floor plans? I think you had existing and proposed together, right?
First or second floor?
The second floor. Can you rotate them 90 degrees so that it's actually facing, yeah.
Let's see if I can.
Can you line up the existing walls? I'm sorry. There. What is that dimensional shift from the original sleeping porch to the new proposed bath? What's that difference in length?
I'm going to say it's probably 3.5 feet deeper,
Okay.
and then it comes forward, as you can see.
Yeah, I can see that too. So how deep is the master bedroom, the one on the shortest dimension?
I believe it's 14 feet.
Okay. Were other options looked at to keep that from moving out towards the rear? So that you're more in keeping with the traditional line of that sleeping porch rather than coming out that additional 3 or 4 feet?
It was, yes, but it was our opinion that the sleeping porch that's there now is actually diminutive to the scale of the house. That's what we felt. So we felt that adding 3.5 feet to that particular dimension was not going to impact the historic significance of the overall house. That on a house of this size, the sleeping porches were actually quite large because they had usually large families. And so this one in particular is small, it's diminutive.
Yep, I
So
agree.
that's why and in addition, what's on the first floor below it was built in the last 10 years. So we're not going over historic material, we're going over something that was added on 10 years ago. So we felt that that was an appropriate move in addition to pulling the master bedroom off the deeper screen porch to give you the turn or the corner that you probably would have seen in a house of this vintage.
Do you have any imagery of that side of the house that's more true to, it's difficult from the imagery that we have in our report to really understand the proportion of how that actually feels, because it is it's from the garage view.
I believe staff had a picture of that full elevation. There.
No, I'm talking about from the street where
Oh,
the
from Inman.
accessory.
From Inman?
Yeah, yeah. That's the view we have, and it's
Right.
it's just really not. So there were no other images, though.
No.
Okay.
I mean, well,
Oh, that's one.
This one helps a little bit.
Yep. So where we're talking about the line for the new second story, and I'm sorry for taking time up, but I want to understand it. That line is going towards the accessory structure. Is that to meet the current line where the columns are on that one-story porch below? Is that where it's lining up?
No. It sits on the first story kitchen wall that doesn't have
Oh,
any
okay, so
windows.
it's shy of those columns.
It's about 4.5 feet shy of those columns. May I show you an elevation that might help?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So you see it sits on that wall?
Sorry, she needs to switch it.
Yep.
Thank you.
It sits on that wall, and then we have this portion here, which is
That's the porch that goes
That's right.
beyond, and the columns are right there on the,
The columns, that's a 4-foot spacing between the wall and the columns, and then you have a pretty, obviously that line that's shown now is the
Connector.
covering.
right.
But the overhang on that is, I would say, actually I could tell you probably if I looked a little more carefully, it's about a foot,
Okay.
maybe 15 inches.
Okay. That's it for me. I'll mull it over in my head. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Taylor?
Can you show us the wall detail again?
The wall section?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I just want to see how the siding's tying into the stem wall. So is there a band board or anything there, or is it siding all the way down to the brick?
At the moment, the siding goes all the way down to the brick. There's no band board.
And that's, I guess, what's matching existing
Yes,
conditions?
exactly. In terms of all the exterior details, we're going to match the existing condition, and by that I mean the historic condition, not all the additions that have been put on over time.
And going back to some of the questions she was asking, how that roof ties into, how will that extension change? Will it still hip around basically like it does now, just
Yes,
we're taking 3 or 4 feet out of that?
exactly. That's going to whip around the back and then
So
tie back in.
nothing really changes there?
No
Okay.
changes there, and certainly no changes of elevation, but to Commissioner Sutton's point, I think that it can be improved overall by
Change of the pitch.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's all I have.
And I'm sorry, that's not it's just a structural building thing, that we can do that, it's not a problem.
All right.
On your west elevation, there are 2 windows that look really close to the vertical trim board.
Are those on the first floor?
Yes, I believe so.
Those are hidden behind the columns.
Okay,
That's why they look funky.
wonderful.
I
Thank
had the
you.
same comment.
So the only comment that I have is, and I just want to make sure, maybe clarify this. So the new proposed second floor feature that's going to be the bathroom, that's supposed to emulate the sleeping screen porch. Did I understand correctly that some of those windows will essentially be spandrel in the sense that you'll have drywall kind of blocking that view, so it will look like a window, but it won't truly be a window?
Yes, but we don't just use drywall. What we do is whatever the window covering is in the rest of that space, it matches exactly. So that goes in between the drywall and the glass. So it looks like it's a functioning window, and certainly if you ever got rid of the drywall, you could use it. But it's really, in terms of modern programming of spaces, and we're trying to make it look like a sleeping porch, it will be we spend a lot of money on these windows that ultimately become pretend, but they can work if at some point another owner decides, no, you know what, I want to open them all up.
Did you look at a different layout or approach to where the program on the interior would allow those windows to be expressed and function as true windows, kind of as that sleeping screen porch, instead of putting them in there and not really using them?
We did, but it's pretty difficult when, and again, this is really client-driven, and it's an interior issue, obviously, programming issue, where they really wanted a substantial shower with a steam. You cannot have windows in those spaces. The bathroom right now, and I have to put my glasses on, sorry. Of all the windows there, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Of the 9, 4 will be functional.
Okay.
So as an example, let's say the aesthetic goes to wood louvers, as solar control. For the spandrel glass, you would have those wood louvers there, and they would be in a substantially or totally closed position. That as a material, they would be no different than all the other windows that are part of that.
Correct.
That's just one example of a way of handling that.
Exactly. So the skin, right, the exterior of the building is exactly the same as the one that opens next door to it, right next to it. It's that we're just closing it in from the inside in order to have wall space. But that's on the inside of the building, and somebody could put a piece of furniture in front of it, or crazy curtains, or whatever they wanted to do.
A
But
rolling scrim.
exactly. We just typically, whatever the same treatment is, and a lot of people, especially in bathrooms, go for the polywood louvers because they don't warp, and that's been done successfully many, many, many times because that these houses have many windows originally because they didn't have air conditioning. So that's how we handle it on the interior design part of it. On the outside, you will not know who's working and who's not
Until the lights come on.
until the lights come on.
Okay. Thank you
And then
very
you can
much.
say there's a dark room in there.
I have no further question or comment.
Any additional questions?
I didn't see a roof plan. Did you provide a roof plan?
No, I'm so sorry. I thought I had one, but I do not. No.
All right, thank you.
Well, if no additional questions, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for a rebuttal.
I guess the only thing I would say is that I think it would be helpful, I think it would improve the project, honestly, to increase the pitch of the proposed addition roofs, as long as we hold on to that 3-foot rolled slope. And there's certainly no difficulty in us doing that. We would, of course, present those drawings to the staff for their approval. Given the width of the spaces we're talking about, there will be an increased pitch, but it's not going to be as steep it'll never be as steep as the main house, because we did test those. But we will try to get as close as we can.
Okay. All right, thank you. At this point, we will close the public hearing. The commissioners can now discuss the case. Would a commissioner like to begin?
I think this is an appropriate addition overall. It's relatively small to the scale of the whole of the house. When it's done, to me, it would appear that it has always been that way.
Okay.
Only question I really had, we answered it, was the roof line. I think if we go back to something close or what is already there,
It would look a whole heck of a lot
I
better.
tend to agree. The rolled out section is actually so flat that
That's
you're
going to
really
be
not going to
that's going to be
see.
a vexing detail from here on out because of the way the building code handles roofs, and whether this project addresses that in part for the additions now, or eventually with this Crewcraft's history with this building later when they do a whole building re-roof, it's going to be visited again.
The way you suggested, there's many options to achieve this, but
Oh,
my
yes.
point is, from the street, it's so flat, you can't even hardly see, you probably won't be able to see what the finish is on that edge anyway.
Well, you don't see it, but when you look at the photographs, what you do see is that the slope, the high roof disappears and it becomes this very beautiful
Right.
crisp line, and that's the beauty in that
Absolutely.
detail.
Mhm.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's a combination of the pitch and maintaining that, I want to call it, it's not an eyebrow, I wouldn't know what to begin to call it, that this low slope transition through the perimeter is the ticket.
I agree.
Commissioner Boyd,
No comments?
Commissioner Clausmith.
I have no additional comments.
So,
I would like to make a motion.
go ahead.
Okay. Move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in ARC 21-390 for the property located at 727 South Edison Avenue in the Hyde Park Historic District with the following conditions: that the north elevation be corrected to indicate the correct relocation of the mechanical equipment, that a roof plan be added to the documents for staff review, and that the roof slopes of the new addition to the rear of the main elevation be revised to get them as steep as possible and close as possible to the existing high main roof. Because based upon the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Hyde Park Historic District design guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons: that the scale, massing, building form, trim and detail are consistent, as well as the project maintains materials within the district. And that's it.
I second the motion.
And then, just wanted to, again, go on the record. Do you understand the conditions or have any questions?
No, I have no questions, and I understand the conditions. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Thank you. Does anyone need to take a break before we do our final?
I think that'd be a wise move.
Okay. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. We'll move on to the next case.
Ms. Jusak, can you swear in the remaining people that?
Anyone that has not already been sworn, would you stand and raise your right hand if you're going to be speaking today? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing this evening is the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation Staff. The final application for your review this evening is in the Seminole Heights Historic District. The address for the property is 5610 North Sewanee Avenue, and this is case number ARC 21-305. This property is located at the southwest corner of Sewanee and Powhatan Avenues. It is a 1926 contributing historic building in the district. It's a Craftsman bungalow-style residence, and we'll go through the photo presentation momentarily, but first to give you a little background history about why we're here this evening. Earlier this year, staff approved a re-roof on this house to install a new asphalt shingle roof system and replace rotten or damaged wood fascia. The project exceeded the scope of work, and therefore a code case was started, a complaint was filed, and a stop work order was issued on the property. Moving quickly through the first part of our photo presentation here, you can see that this particular parcel is highlighted in green here. It is in the Seminole Heights Historic District, both within the national and the local historic district boundaries. This is the Sanborn map from the 1920s, showing the footprint of the structure in question with Powhatan Avenue to the north and Sewanee Avenue, where the building is facing to the east. This is the present-day aerial, or from 2020 aerial, again with Powhatan Avenue to the north and Sewanee to the east. You can see that compared to the Sanborn map, the roof overhang greatly extends closer to the property line than the footprint that was shown on the Sanborn map does. This is a picture of the front or the east side of the house in June. This is after the stop work order had been issued. And this is a photo from prior to the work that had been done to the roof line. This is from Google Street View, so you can see the generous overhangs that were on this house. Note as we go through these pictures that originally this property had a double barge rafter, very extended overhangs up to about 4 feet in width, and these lengthy brackets that would extend out to support the overhang. This is the side of the same side of the house as it appeared in June, with the reduced overhangs. They had been cut approximately in half, from about 4 feet to 2 feet, and the corbels cut back and the brackets cut back to the same length. This is that same side, just looking at it directly from taking a view more directly south so that you see the full side of the house. That's a detail showing part of the area where the overhang had been cut back. You can see in the second story, by the chimney there, the difference in the area where the roof line, where the overhang originally extended to where it had been cut. And then this is showing a view over the front porch. You can see the original length of the overhang still on this east side. However, the truncated overhang on the north side is visible there. And that's a shot looking back along the north side from the east. So we're looking west along the north side here. This is a Google Street View from prior to the work, looking at the south side of the house. So it's kind of a difficult shot to get due to all the foliage along the front and along the streetscape there. But it's, again, you can see the extensive overhang there and the lengthy brackets. And then this is how that side of the house appeared after the work. This is a view looking between the two properties there, the one directly to the south and the subject site. And again, looking at how the distance between where the overhang originally extended and to where it was cut back. And that's just another shot looking along that same elevation. Moving to the rear, this is the rear of the house from a Google Street View prior to the work. And then after the work was halted in June. This is the accessory structure on the property. We have a view here of the house directly to the south. You can see that it does also have some large overhangs. It's a very common detail in bungalow structures found throughout the Seminole Heights Historic District. The Seminole Heights Historic District is known primarily for its bungalow structures and their ornate details. This is the house to the north across Powhatan. and the house to the east across Sewanee Avenue. The property on the other side of the alley across from behind the subject site is a commercial lot. This view is looking north along Sewanee Avenue, and then we have a view looking south down Sewanee Avenue. Before the applicant comes forward to make their presentation, I'd like to note that, their request tonight that you're here to hear is to go from the original 4-foot overhang to a new 2-foot overhang, and that is the extent of the request that you're here to hear this evening. So with that, I have the applicant come forward and present their application.
Good evening, Kevin Reale, 401 East Jackson Street, here for the applicant. We also have the contractor and applicant representative here as well, who will both be speaking. To start off, I do have a letter signed by a number of neighbors in support that I'd like to submit to the clerk for the record. I'd also like to begin by discussing the pictures that were just shown, and we will talk about in more detail how we got here. And what's important to note is that those pictures are not the finished product. So what we're proposing tonight and what was the goal all along is not what you have just seen. That's the result of a stop work order. And while staff and the applicant disagree, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, what is important to note is that staff was very supportive in us protecting the property. So what we had is essentially a re-roof application to replace, and some confusion on the scope of what that was. And so the stop work order came in. Staff allowed work to be completed to waterproof the structure and to shingle a majority of the roof that won't be a part of what we're proposing today. And now we have a separate application to try and confirm the appropriateness of what we're proposing here in its place. So what we're starting with here is we're calling this existing elevation. Obviously, it's not actually what's existing there today, but since we don't have a good photograph of that, this is an elevation with the same scale of overhang as what existed prior. The site plan comes in 2 pages. We have the lower roof line and the upper roof line. This is the lower roof line. We show that it's approximately reduced by half is what we're requesting. The numbers are approximately 2 feet, and then, approximately 4 feet is what existed, and we're asking to change to approximately 27 inches. And then the same would exist for the upper roof line. Here we have what the requested elevation would look like, and so I hope this image is much different than what is seen in the photos of the condition today, as it's in a stop work condition today, where the work hasn't been completed. But the request today is to build essentially an overhang that looks the same but is reduced in scale. We have additional elevations, and we can come back to those. But so part of the reason that I'm up here presenting, and then we'll have the contractor come up and talk about the challenges, is why we got here. And there are 2 main reasons The slide I'm going to put up it's very busy. It's not meant to be comprehensive. I just want to present everything to the commission now, and then we'll break down the different issues. But the main problem we have is that the property is so close to, or the structure is so close to the property line, and the overhang is so big that it actually encroaches. And we're talking about a property line encroachment, not a setback encroachment. Now, of course, with historic structures that have been around and had the zoning code come up around them, it's not uncommon to have some sort of a encroachment into setbacks, but this property has to be changed because it encroaches onto the neighboring property and it can't stay in that condition. Additionally, the issue is, and we'll have some other pictures of this later when the contractor and roofer discusses, the overhangs are so significant that the weight of them has caused significant sag and deterioration to where the condition of the roof had to be replaced. And you can see it a little bit here, where you can, if you can look closely, you can see how the angle there has changed. And we have a better picture that shows a crest line on top of the roof that we'll show later. The other issue, and we'll come into this later, the rafters underneath the overhang were spaced at about 2 feet, which matches approximately the rafters that go throughout the face of the structure on the east face. And so a reduction structurally is going to need some sort of rafter. And so what we're proposing is to go into the next rafter so that the rafter spacing remains consistent. And what we think that we're going to show this evening is that the reduced design is actually more consistent with what is in the neighborhood. And we have a number of photographs to show that. The overhang at 4 feet was much larger than average of what exists in the neighborhood, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So what we have here, this is a trim of a survey that we have completed in the record. Now, the encroachment is not significant in scale compared to the size of the overhang, but the problem is without cooperation of the neighbor, we don't have it's going to be very difficult to build right up to the line. And this is where staff and the applicant have disagreed. So the staff report has all of the historic guidelines, and we agree with all the guidelines that staff has put in their support. What we think we have here is we have an impractical situation because building right up to the property line is not going to be very feasible because you don't have the space when you can't go on the nearest property, especially with a neighbor that doesn't want you on their property, to replace that. And so what we're asking for is a little bit of breathing room and the understanding that the most logical place to cut back here is to that other rafter. And then we have factual evidence that we'll put in the record that shows how that's consistent with the historic district. Here we have a side-by-side elevation of the request. And again, what's noted is the goal is to have a very similar feature, just reduced scale. And so we think that while the photographs of the as-is conditions are shocking, the final product that we're proposing here is not shocking and is in character with the historic district. So for the next couple of slides, we're going to jump into the code a little bit, and we're going to present our justification. And so this part is not quoting the code directly, but what we're suggesting here is an aesthetically similar overhang, and that it'll be more consistent, and that replacing the overhang as is today is impossible, and that to go right up to the property line is impractical. A smaller reduction would be too difficult to complete properly, and so we're proposing to go to that second rafter. And then to make the property consistent, this is a proposal for the north and south elevations, which have the same overhangs. The east and west elevations will remain unchanged. First, looking to the historic guidelines, the staff report, as I said, pulls a number of a number of details from the Seminole Heights Design Guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior standards. But the staff report doesn't mention that there are situations where this commission can authorize to make a change as long as we make a change that's consistent with the historic district. Where repair is not practical, details should be replaced with comparable details. And what we're proposing to the commission tonight is that repair is not practical the way that it existed before this repair began. And then further, just to close the door there, and that the comparable details that we're proposing today are acceptable. What's also not listed in the staff report is section 27115K of the Land Development Code, which directs what the ARC shall consider at these hearings. This criteria is lengthy. I've only listed the first two here because the remainder of the provisions are essentially not applicable for this limited application that is for repair. But the ARC shall consider the effect of the proposed work on the property. Now that, of course, is a double-edged sword, and we understand that because by changing the property, we're affecting the property. But additionally, the effect on the property because of the structure's location so close to the property line is something that the Commission should consider as well. Additionally, the structure itself, with what's the most logical change, the proposal to cut back to the next rafter is what's best for this property, given that it cannot be replaced in the exact condition that it had before. And most importantly, is that the relationship between such work and other buildings and structures or objects in the landmark site or other properties in the historic district have to be considered. So the staff report focuses on the fact that this property itself is going to change, and we agree with that, and we understand staff's concern with that. And what we're proposing is that when you consider this change in light of the difficulties and in the most logical change, and then you compare it to other properties in the district, that it's acceptable and that the Commission can support our request. Notably, the staff report doesn't talk about section 27115. And so the staff report, again, we agree with all of the items in the staff report regarding what the criteria are, just disagree with staff's finding on the scope being limited to just this property when you're considering a change. And additionally, that a change just inside the property line, basically a minimal change, is practical. We believe that is impractical. And the contractor will come up after me and talk about the impracticality of that change, but that's not my area of expertise. So we're going to shift now to the surrounding properties. These were 6 examples that we thought best expressed what we're trying to do here. And these are our properties in the neighborhood that we photographed. And as you'll notice, none of these have a second rafter underneath the overhang. And all of these are overhangs at approximately 2 feet. Now, we weren't able to measure these, so we're not holding out the exact measurement of these. But when you compare the scale of what I have shown here, well, I'm not going to quite be able to fit them both, so I'm going to go back and forth here. But this is an image here of what we're proposing, and when compared to what's in the area, you can see what's being proposed is consistent with what's in the area. Again, what existed there with the double rafter under the overhang and with the almost 4-foot overhang was more than average by a lot. I have some packets here I'd like to submit into the record, and I'm going to go through those on the, there's one for everyone. Oh, that's okay. Thank you. So I'm going to thumb through these, but I think the point is this will be submitted in the record, so it might be easier for all the commissioners to thumb through at their own pace. But we photographed a large number of properties in the area. And what you'll notice is that the 6 that we showed on the previous slide have some of the larger overhangs. The majority of the images we have in this packet are actually much smaller overhangs. So, do I just touch this once to turn it on?
It's already on.
Oh. All right, sorry. So, again, this first page here, overhangs that are smaller than what's being proposed. This page here, I believe this is one of the ones that we showed before with a commensurate overhang. The top picture here is a commensurate overhang. The bottom one is a much smaller overhang. Here we have another commensurate overhang. The one on the top here is a smaller overhang. The one on the bottom is a commensurate overhang. 2 properties here with commensurate overhangs. Here's a property with a smaller overhang than what we're proposing. Again, a couple properties with a smaller but fairly commensurate overhangs. A property with a commensurate overhang to what's being proposed. The top here, we have a smaller overhang. The bottom, a commensurate overhang. The top, we have a smaller overhang. The bottom, a commensurate overhang. This one is one of the 6 that were shown, commensurate overhang. And then this one, a commensurate overhang, but still smaller than what we proposed. So the challenge here tonight, and so I'm a second career attorney, so I'm not going to pretend that there's 20 years of hearing experience behind me, but this is the first time that I've ever come before a commission without staff recommendation or approval. And I mention that because I understand the commission's desire to be deferential to staff. And we don't disagree with the basic findings of staff. We just disagree with staff's understanding of the impracticality of replacing so close to the property line and replacing at some different distance when we have the 2 rafters underneath. And so in my conclusion, and then I'll have the contractor come up and speak, the repair here is needed, and an identical repair is impossible in certain sections and impractical to have a small reduction. What we proposed through factual evidence with these pictures in the record is that what's proposed is actually more consistent with what's in the area. There wasn't a single photograph there that had 2 rafters, and there wasn't an overhang anywhere near what existed before this situation began. And that both the design guidelines and Section 27115K allow the commission to approve a change that's not exact as long as it's fitting in character with the surrounding properties. And that's what we've shown here. Now, I'd like to have the contractor come up and introduce himself and talk about the difficulties in the necessity for the repair in the first place. Your elevations right here.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is Charles Higdon. I'm with Allen's Roofing. I've been in the roofing industry since 1994. I'm also a state licensed contractor since 2000. I've been with the owners of the property since the very beginning. If you can look at this,
I'm going to zoom in, so give me a second.
Yeah.
We can take our time.
If you'll see in this photo, there's a few reasons why we made this decision. The property line encroachment was obviously the biggest driving factor. However, this size of this overhang with the bracket corbel design being made all of rough sawn cypress, if you walked out on the edge, the bottom corner of this roof, it would have collapsed. You physically couldn't walk out on it. It was dropping.
Talk about the,
yeah.
That's the crest.
If you like, and it's because of the shrubbery and stuff like you've seen in other photos, you couldn't get a real street view from before. That's one we have, but you can see there's actually a roof line, a ridge line that's going across that where it's dropped significantly. At 4 feet, it was almost 6 inches at the very, very peak. And when we cut that back and cut those corbels back, that lifted came right back around. The idea was to lighten the load, the weight of it up off of there. And also, if you look at these corbels or brackets, The jack on the bottom on the angle isn't on a 45-degree angle. It's actually on a very low angle that goes out. In conventional framing, it won't support nowhere near as much as those shorter corbels. It's on a steeper angle. Conventional framing, the steeper you can make that, the stronger it can be. So they would stiffen all of those up so when this roof is finished, it will last longer before it has to be torn apart or anything now. All of the fascia, or the new fascia, is rough sawn 2x12 cypress. The existing corbels are 4x4 rough sawn cypress. Unfortunately, rough sawn cypress is great. It lasts almost forever. However, it's not as dense as, say, a southern yellow pine or an old hard pine, which is what would be needed almost, because these are becoming structural elements. They're not just decorative. Those are the only thing that we're holding this thing up whatsoever. And you can see in the other photos of those elevations where Also, the other thing I wanted to point out, before we started, the fascia was 4 or 5 different dimensions all the way around this house. Obviously, from previous repairs or during re-roofs, instead of replacing it with the 2x12 size cypress that you have to have custom made, there was 1x6 in some places. The dormers up top had 2x8s. The bottoms had 1x6s. It just didn't work out. So that our original application, we stated that we'd be making that uniform all the way around the 2x12, and so that it's not no longer made with so many different or unlike materials. There was actually some rotted wood on this. It has a tongue and groove 1x4 beadboard overhang soffit, which is actually the decking of the roof. There was on the bottom corners, especially in the rear. I don't have photos of it, unfortunately. They were rotted out back there, but that's part of what we cut off. Got rid of that, so it was advantageous for the owner also to not have to chase down more of that type of lumber. The final thing I would like to point out is where the property line encroachment does occur on this elevation here. Well, that helps there, yeah. To physically try to do this without a helicopter or something of some sort, it's almost impossible. We did actually rent a lift from the street that reached to 80 feet to be able to reach out and try to get this done, but you can't put 2 or 3 of them in there, and that's what would be needed to try to rebuild that all the way up to the full 4 feet or any type of dual bar drafter without being on the neighbor's property or disturbing his property whatsoever. You just physically can't do it. There's nothing there to walk on. There's nothing to support it at all. So that's about all I've got to say. Our driving factors there.
My name is Kenneth Colin. I'm speaking on behalf of the owner of the property. My family has been in the neighborhood for many, many years. My grandparents purchased 5758 Suwannee in 1924 and lived there for in excess of 60 years. And my sister lives in the 5700 block. So we're no strangers to this neighborhood. And we respect it. These are beautiful homes. These are beautiful homes. And we wouldn't alter anything without cause, without good reason. And as you can see by the picture I put up on my cell phone, the break there, and the weight giving way and eventually damaging the roof. It was a tough decision because the shingles still had perhaps 5 years of life left in them, but I'm not sure that the overhang had 5 years of life left in it. So in order to preserve this and repair it, we instituted this work. And we were under the impression that we were all squared away with the Historical Society. Apologize for any misunderstanding on that. But it's interesting, I used to walk the neighborhood with my grandfather, and I have a recollection of this house as having a exterior stairwell going up to the second floor. And that this was really a one-point, multiple-family structure. I don't know when it was removed, but you can see from the inside and from the outside that it was patched over. The door was removed and patched over. Well and good. But again, what we're proposing here preserves the home, preserves the character of the home, and is consistent with the majority, if not all the homes in Seminole Heights in this area of Suwannee and over several other streets. Thank you.
And I'll just close with a recap that, we think that the commission's actually commanded by Section 27-115 to consider these other homes and propose that this design here is in a scale that fits in with the historic character of the historic district. And with that, we'll reserve any time for rebuttal, and after staff and public comment, answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, staff will present the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioners. Elaine Lund, Historic Preservation staff. Just to reiterate what I stated at the beginning of the presentation earlier, this is the second application that has come in for this roof and the work that has been done. The first was only to change out the asphalt shingle roof system and replace the rotten or damaged wood fascia. And the exceeding scope of the project was what led us to be here tonight. So the new application is what includes the request for the reduction in the size of the overhang. The review criteria for the Seminole Heights Historic District include the Seminole Heights Design Guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. Structures in the Seminole Heights Historic District do appear in a wide variety of designs, with the primary architectural style being the bungalow. However, no two bungalows are designed alike. There are a number of examples of the Craftsman bungalow, the most ornate bungalow style in the district. But other structures in the district exhibit a variety of the architectural details influenced by the Craftsman movement. The main details that you will see that exemplify the bungalows are the use of multiple exterior materials and features expressed in a variety of ways, and these may include materials such as brick and stucco, wood shingles, stone, and the variety of elements might include things like the exposed rafter ends, the wide overhangs, multiple light doors, windows, and transoms, and decorative non-structural elements. So these elements as a whole are the common thread that unites the Seminole Heights Historic District. The design guidelines for Seminole Heights and also the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation discuss how the roof can be one of the items that expresses the architectural character of a building, and each element of the roof is important in defining the character of the house. So the design guidelines state that every effort should be made to retain these features or to repair them. The Secretary of the Interior Standards do state the same, of course, and recommend identifying, retaining, and preserving roofs and their functional and decorative features that are important in defining the overall historic character of the building. The Secretary of the Interior Standards, there are 10 of them that relate to rehabilitation, and numbers 2, 5, and 9 speak mostly to this particular case. Number 2 states the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved, and that the removal of historic materials or alterations of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. Number 5 states that distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a historic property shall be preserved. And number 9 states that new additions, exterior alterations, or related new constructions shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. Going back to the local district design guidelines, You know, the staff of the, for the Architecture Review Commission is tasked with reviewing these applications to determine the extent of alterations, and if the application involves minor roof repairs or replacement with appropriate materials, staff may issue the certificate of appropriateness. In this case, staff found that this is not an appropriate request because it alters the original roof line to the extent that it impacts the characteristics that express the building style. The especially wide overhangs are a character-defining detail of this particular structure, and the reduction in size of the overhang diminishes not only the historical character of the building, but also of the historic district. So therefore, we found that this application is not consistent with the Seminole Heights Design Guidelines or the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. In addition to the letters that were provided by the applicant, there were some others that we received, and those are in your packets for your review. So with that, I'm available for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this point, we will open the public hearing to any public comment. If anyone would like to speak either for or against. Okay. If we could just line up against the kind of the wall. Feel free to go ahead. And then is anyone giving time to anyone else? Okay, and then staff, I guess, do we have the paperwork for that? Okay.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
My name is William Hunter. I live at 5806 North Branch Avenue in Seminole Heights. I've lived in Seminole Heights since 1970. I've seen its resurgence, and I've seen the positive effect the historic districts have had on that resurgence. 6 years ago, we bought a house there which had been empty for some 8 years. Here's a picture of it. We went to, I'll ignore what needed to be done on the inside since that isn't germane to what we're talking about tonight. But on the outside, we had to go to considerable extra trouble and expense to see that things were done in accordance with the guideline and that they were done correctly. I'd like to address the 5 reasons given in this application for wanting this exception to the damage done to that house. They say the design is aesthetically similar. Well, it is, but it's half size. That really isn't the same as being consistent. An approximately 2-foot overhang is more consistent with similar overhangs in the district. If you're familiar with Seminole Heights, you know that consistency doesn't carry much water. You can walk most any block and find houses that are vastly different because they were built, unlike new developments, usually one at a time, occasionally 2. The encroachment issue, I can't address that legally. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not versed in that. But looking at it from a practical point of view, I noticed that the work was done in June and this application is in July. I don't think that was an issue until what they were doing was discovered. On a practical basis, I don't think that encroachment matters. It's not a brick wall across a driveway. It's 15 or 20 feet in the air, and as far as I can tell, it's about 6 or 8 inches. If I lived south of there, my feeling would be, who cares? It doesn't affect me, in any way. Number 4, a smaller reduction is impracticable because the overhang must be cut back to the next rafter. Well, that isn't true. It doesn't have to be cut back. If on that side it needed to be cut back because of legal reasons, you simply cut it back to 6 to 8 inches, install a new rafter, or better yet, use the previous one since its material will be vastly superior to whatever you could get right now. And finally, there's concern about the south and the north being consistent. If it were cut back that 6 to 8 inches, I don't think that difference would be at all noticeable, and I think very few people would see it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Am I ready? Okay.
No, Kamaria Pettis-Malco from the legal department. Ms. Lund, can you explain that he has additional time?
Mr. Dobbs did submit a speaker's waiver form. I'd like to make sure that the two people who have given their time for Mr. Dobbs are here in the audience. If you could raise your hand, please. Alyssa Getzoff. Okay, thank you. And Charles Shob. Thank you.
Am I ready to go? Okay. My name is Alan Dobbs, 5502 North Cherokee Avenue. I am here as a resident and as a professional. I've lived in Seminole Heights for over 30 years, and I've been doing work in Seminole Heights over 30 years. Today I was curious as to how many projects I had done. I've actually done over 60 projects in Seminole Heights in those 30 years. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood and the unique architecture and idiosyncrasies of these old houses and certain structural issues, obviously when they come up. The staff has been really good post-COVID, with staff approvals and stuff, and this was a staff approval. I take issue with the rough sawn 12-inch cedar fascia. The houses that had rafter tails typically did not have fascias. Fascias were for houses that had closed soffits or houses that had gutters. Otherwise, they didn't have fascias, and they're not a structural element. To be frank, this is the most egregious thing anybody has done in Seminole Heights as long as I've been in the neighborhood. This is an exceptional house for many reasons, but especially its oversized brackets and overhang. They are the most significant character-defining feature of this home, and it's what makes it really special and unique. This is a textbook example of why we need design guidelines, and more importantly, why they need to be enforced. Otherwise, it's not fair to the neighborhood, nor all the design professionals and contractors that have done work, are doing work, and will do work in the future. I think having, not having the resources to address it initially, but then having plenty of resources to hire a law firm and come represent you at this hearing after the fact, I think is, again, sort of disingenuous. The first application said nothing about encroachment or reducing the overhang. And I understand that things come up during construction, which they do, but you have to make every effort to take care of that during construction. And I'm going to address the particulars in a minute, but the encroachment, this house was built in 1926. The house to the south was built in 1928, 2 years later. I would like to know, was a demand letter issued by the adjacent neighbor? Did they ask the neighbor for access to their property? Have they asked them for an easement, either for the encroachment or an access easement for maintenance? Have they considered asking if they would sell 12 inches of their property? The adjacent lot is 56 feet wide. They could buy a foot, and then they wouldn't even have to do an easement. So all those are alternatives that I hope they would have considered. A contractor with Turk Construction, he issued a letter today. I'm not sure if the board has seen that. He did work on this house, a lot of work on this house, and he was saying that all the things that they're citing as things that are impossible and not practical are just not true. And I agree with that because like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years, and it's amazing what you can do with these old wood frame homes. The overhangs, you don't have much dead load, certainly not much live load, and only a little bit of uplift. I did take the time and prepared a detailed drawing for them on how they could reinforce the brackets. There was no consideration to look at alternatives. For example, it's 10 and 5/16 is the encroachment at the worst case.
They could have easily reduced this overhang by that amount and still maintain the two barge rafters, which are the major character-defining features. I'm trying to go through this fast because I see my time's going by really quickly here. Again, alternative solutions should be proposed, and as well as how to address the easement or encroachment. You know, and I understand if they can't build it back, they can't, but at least try, you know. And if you can't, then provide a design that's more closely like the original that was hastily removed. Let's see. So, okay, so I got 30 seconds. Okay, well, yeah, I'm glad I handed out that detailed drawing for you guys, but, you know, there's a lot of detail in there. I do want to show a couple pictures because the other issue is all the fascias. They increased the size of all the fascias and barge rafters to 12 inches. They were 8 inches before, and it's questionable if the fascia should have been there originally. So, so I think scale and proportion are incredibly important, so I hope y'all will take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ARC. My name is Tim Keyports. I am a property owner in Seminole Heights at 402 and 404 East Idlewild. I'm also the president of the Old Seminole Heights Neighborhood Association. Our group submitted a letter into the record, and I hope you have all had an opportunity to review it. Rather than restating those points or any of the points made by my fellow citizens that have come before me, I'd like to just make a few comments. First, you don't see the Old Seminole Heights Neighborhood Association in front of the ARC very often. You might ask why that is. It's not because we're asleep at the wheel. We have gentlemen in the room that read all of the documents that come before you. We do review those, and we trust that the Historic Preservation staff, Mr. Fernandez and his staff, and the ARC up on the dais do the right thing and do so consistently. But we are here tonight due to this egregious attack on this contributing structure. The gentleman that gave his presentation, the attorney, mentioned we went and took pictures of all the other structures in the area, and we're just trying to make it look like them. As Alan pointed out, Seminole Heights, and as Bill pointed out, Seminole Heights is not like them. We don't want vanilla on every property. We don't want 2-foot overhangs on every single property. They're all unique, and that's what makes Seminole Heights so special. So unlike the 3 cases that came before you this morning earlier, I'm shocked that this request is coming after the fact. So I walk around my neighborhood, I drive around my neighborhood, and all of a sudden I see a roof that's been cut off on both the north and the south with no consideration to the contributing structure or to the neighbors. And then they come and request permission to do this, but it's already happened. So 2 points I'd like to make, and I'll leave it at that. How do we help our historic neighborhoods and the contractors? And I do respect the gentleman that's in the room here. It's a tough job. These are tough structures to work on. So 1, I'd like to make a recommendation to the staff that all contractors working in historic areas sign an affidavit that they have read and understand the guidelines and that they will not deviate from those plans without coming and getting guidance from you all in advance. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this situation right now. That sign-off of that affidavit could be uploaded into the folio for the public to see. The second thing is, and I don't want to chastise Mr. Fernandez, the historic preservation staff needs to be more careful and diligent about staff approvals. I know they didn't approve this one, but we've had some other issues recently, especially with recent sales of homes, and especially when it's a non-homesteaded property or it's a contributing structure. So I would request that of the staff. Thank you. I'm going to remain behind if there's any additional questions.
Thank you. Any additional individuals that would like to speak? All right. At this point, the commissioners can now ask questions for either staff or the applicant. Would a commissioner like to begin?
I would like to ask a relatively basic question to the applicant. whether it be the owner responding or anyone a part of the design and build team. And this goes into the lot line difficulty question. Has anyone formally approached the south property owner to your site to request access for your repairs?
Yes, there's actually a lawsuit to request an easement, and the neighbor to the south will not cooperate with granting an easement, will not cooperate with allowing us to enter the property to work, will not cooperate with us to have the overhang exist. And that lawsuit is stayed pending the result of what this commission does today.
Thank you very much.
So I mean,
I have a follow-up question to that. When was that lawsuit put into action?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
When was the lawsuit actually filed?
I don't recall the date, but it was probably sometime in April, I want to say.
And when were the eaves cut?
This project actually began, we began the application process in February. At the last week of February, first week of March is actually when we tore the roof off and started installing the new fascia. We cut the overhangs back that first and second day. And tore the roof off and dried it in. I believe it was on the second day is when the stop work order was actually issued. We couldn't go any further. The roof sat there under underlayment for several months.
Thank you. I got
Yes,
my.
ma'am.
I probably am off
That's
on my
okay.
date.
I just
but-
wanted to know when the lawsuit was issued and when the gable ends were cut.
Yeah, I think I might be off on my date because we were messing around with the neighbor for about 3 or 4 months before we decided that we just needed to proceed with the work. I didn't really want to go through another hurricane season with that sag on that roof.
2021 then.
Yeah.
So you did ask
Yeah,
for,
it was 2000.
you did ask for access before you cut the gable ends off?
Yes.
That is correct?
We attempted, yes.
And then the
Roots.
lawsuit,
Not cooperative.
He will not allow you on the property.
Okay.
He started to call the police,
All
things
right.
like that.
Yeah, we've had some problems with the property line as well. I've had the property surveyed twice, and on the second survey, he noted that someone had moved the corner pin 6 inches into the property. So I'm
Okay.
not saying who, but just, you know.
thank you. Thank
It's
you.
a
You answered my
difficult-
question.
Are there any pictures of the roof after it was taken off so we can see the sheathing, just to how it all tied in?
I don't have them with me. We do have them in progress photos where we read out the deck and things like that. I can show you how it's sheeted, yeah. I don't have them here today, but I can get them to staff.
Okay, and you stated that that sheathing is in fact tongue and groove across the entire roof?
Yes, the whole thing is 1x4, tongue and groove, yeah.
So that sag just, it's not normal for.
It's on both, and it was on the north elevation and the south elevation. Both of those gable ends were doing it. Everything else, all the rest was fine in the house. The upper dormers were 2 foot.
Okay.
It's just those two were the only ones affected.
Was the structural engineer brought on board, a licensed Florida structural engineer brought on board for consultation?
No, ma'am.
Was there any alternative methods looked at before it was cut back?
Any alternative methods that, I'm going to call it as an example
To brace the roof back up?
to shore it up. We didn't follow into it too far once we made our decision to cut back to that rafter because the physical capability to perform the work. You have to be able to stand on because you can't get on the neighbor's property, you have to be able to stand on the work somewhat to make it happen. And it was so structurally unsound. If you put 2 men on there, you were going down. It was over. It doesn't look like it in the photos, but you'll see our, like I said, staff dealt with this. It was very bad. So no, sir, we didn't take any more.
All right, so just to be clear, you're stating you could not, because of the property line issue, which, if I remember correctly, it was previously encroaching 6 inches or so over the property line.
Yes, sir.
So you had roughly 3.5 feet underneath the soffit.
I believe it was at the worst point, I think it was right at 9 or 10 inches with the extension past the roof line of the bracket. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Commissioner Boyd?
I don't have any questions at this time.
I have a couple of questions. So further kind of just to get clarification, when your crew actually cut the roof, were you standing on the roof or below?
We were standing on the roof, actually above the gable truss, reaching out.
Okay.
And there's a person behind him trying to catch the pieces and just take off in chunks, little bits.
Okay. So you had theoretically, let's say 3 feet below the roof on the property that you could have braced the existing roof in some fashion or done work under it, correct?
You're talking about trying to brace it off of the house or the ground? I wasn't out on the neighbor's property whatsoever.
I'm just saying there was space below the roof that you could have done something, correct?
No, well, not with the fences there and all the shrubbery between the neighbors and stuff. I mean, you probably had to remove all that, which I don't know what the cause is on that or not.
Okay.
Point out
So
that you have other items there as well. You have a pump, you have an air conditioner.
Yep.
So it's, no, take it back. You don't have an air conditioner there. You have a pump house there.
Yeah.
So
it's hard to access.
Yep, I understand. So I can understand most of this conversation and the kind of discussion has focused all on the property side that has the easement encroachment.
Yes, sir.
What was the rationale then behind let's do it on the other side where there is no issue? Was that simply just to match the new condition that was
Uniformly,
decided on?
To look at it from the east elevation, you look at it, and look at just this one cycle. It was so substantial that it would have stuck out. I think 2 foot on one side, 4 foot on the other would have been substantial. And the north elevation had a ridge, and it had dropped also. It wasn't as bad as the southern elevation, but it was already on its way to where the fireplace is located, where that was cut back. That was dropping significantly. Unfortunately, I don't have a photo of that. But.
Okay, so what was the rationale behind switching the fascia from 8 inches to 12 inches that was presented?
It is a 12-inch fascia. Not the rafter coming back was a 2x8, the middle one, and at the very end was a 2x12 going up the gable end. Now, at the very end of the bottom of that barge rafter, it gets trimmed down on a level cut. That's how it was done before because it was going up against a 1x8 fascia. So when you went to the very end of it, yeah, you were measuring that. That's about where the gutters are. If you went out to the actual meat of it, it was a 2x12. And we had that specially custom made by a sawmill to match that exactly same type material, exact same size, exact same finish. There, actually, you can see that is a good photo. He does have. You can see the ridge where this one was dropping about just below the fireplace. That had the same structural issues.
And what you're proposing as the proposed design of 2 feet on the north and south, you believe that that's a similar detail that is, matching the surrounding conditions, and that it matches and kind of relates back to the original design feature?
Yes, that's why we added all the factual evidence into the record to support that. So believe that's our opinion, yes, but additionally, there's the couple dozen or so pictures in the record as factual evidence to support that opinion.
How do you rationalize the idea that you're missing a rafter on either end that kind of help give the the identity of the larger overhangs with the 2 rafters that is now gone?
So the idea there is that to have the second rafter but shorten the length, you're going to have a smaller space between the rafters, and so you have rafters at a set length going across the whole property and then pinched together at the end. And so the whole goal there was that's the existing rafter, that's the existing spacing, and for consistency, that seemed the logical place to make the cut. Additionally, we didn't find examples of other structures with 2 rafters, and so we believe that was more consistent.
If I can add, physically, from what a human's capability is, and how tall are you, how long your arms are, you can only stand and reach out so far to function too. That did come into play to decide cut it directly at the middle of that rafter that was in the middle. That's about as far as you could reach with 2 men to be able to break down pieces.
Okay. Are there any additional questions either for staff or the applicant?
I've got a couple.
Okay.
Yes.
going back to what Commissioner Greco mentioned, my first questions were kind of referring to the easement and/or encroachment side. I mean, with not a lot of regard to the other portions of the home. The reason you cut this back was for structural issues, is what it sounds like originally. Is that?
There's several issues. The property line, the rotten wood.
If we're on the other side of the home, the property line doesn't seem to be an issue. So my question is referring to, on that side of the home, was the reason structural?
Yes.
And that,
And to match. So,
And so to follow that up was, and again, back to our other commissioner's question, was a structural engineer brought into or consulted on alternative methods to potentially secure that portion of the roof?
No, sir, that was not.
but to add on to that, the need for the repair was going to exist whether it was replaced at 4 feet or as we proposed. So there was going to need to be work to shore up the roof. The request to change to 2 feet has to do with the encroachment and the uniformity of the property. So it's a combination of issues that, and with the goal of consistency both on the property and with the neighborhood, that is how that was coming. That's how the conclusion came.
The only other question I've got then is for staff. On the encroachment side, if the roof line is not touched and it is just reshingled, as it was permitted to be done, does it become a property line issue?
I would object. That's not a question for staff. That's a question for legal staff. Okay, sorry, just asking.
Kamaria Pettis-Malcolm from the City Attorney's Office. So the city would not be involved in that aspect? That's between, I'm sorry. Yeah, the adjacent neighbor, and I don't know the person's name, but it's a private issue, not between the city, so.
My question's more in line with, I guess, the permitting side, which I think has already been answered. It seems like it was grandfathered in, I guess is where I was going with that.
Oh, I apologize, Commissioner Taylor. Are you saying how will
Had
this
the roof
property?
line not been changed, there's no issues, whether there's an encroachment or not?
It was just a re-roofing. So typically, that is not something that comes up in a
Right.
permitting aspect for re-roofing. And I think that's where Commissioner Taylor's coming from. If they had not cut it back, would this have been an encroachment issue? I think that's the question, correct?
So our, Dennis Fernandez, Historic Preservation Manager, so our staff review was for a re-roof. We were not given information pertaining to structural integrity, to encroachments, and the city permitted that. So our certificate of appropriateness enabled the permit. So, you know, we would have permitted it with the encroachment.
any additional questions?
None. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for a rebuttal.
So a number of the items in rebuttal were, we got the opportunity to address in the commission's questions. Regarding the legal issues, the encroachment is an issue. It's in dispute and it is in a litigation now that is stayed depending on what happens here, because depending on what happens here would make the issue of the encroachment no longer an issue. Regarding expense and the suggestion that expense is an issue here is incorrect. The expense taken by hiring renting an 80 or 60-foot lift to do this work, for example, is a great expense. And the goal here is not to save expense. The roof was failing, there was an encroachment, there was a misunderstanding on what the original permit allowed, and we're here to try and rectify that. So we're conceding that that was incorrect. However, what we are proposing is something that we believe is in character with the neighborhood and does nothing to destroy the historic character of the house. And the code section that governs the decisions that this commission is supposed to make says that you are to consider the other properties in the neighborhood there's significant factual evidence in the record to show that what we're proposing does fit within the character of the historic district. The encroachment issue is unfortunately worse than just the overhang that existed there before. It's also the ability to do the work, and I can read from Commissioner's questions about doing the work underneath, but the work underneath with 3 feet is just wasn't something that the contractor was able to do. The contractor was having to do the work from above. So what we are suggesting here is that the scale and proportion of the change we are proposing is in the character of the historic district. We believe there's factual evidence to support that, and that a change has to be made because of the encroachment, and the change we're proposing is appropriate. Additionally, with the idea of the second rafter in the middle there, the second rafter would break the uniformity on the property itself. But we're trying to maintain that consistency. The structural drawings here are something that we just saw today, but the scale of this is actually not much different than what we're proposing. This just has the second rafter, and we would propose that there's no evidence of a property with a second rafter in the historic district. And with that, do you have anything to add, Ken?
I just like to say that the original application mistake was my fault. If I'd have known many of the things I know now, I would have added much more information, much more dimensions, and to avoid this problem. It wasn't intended to be deceptive. It was just out of ignorance. It will never happen again, that's for sure. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we'll close the public hearing, and the commissioners can now discuss the case. Someone like to begin?
I'll make my statement. This is a 1926 wood frame, wood finish, contributing structure in an historic neighborhood. Anyone who's had any dealings with wood of that age or near that age or wanting to be of that age in construction, in our dwellings, in our boats, under any circumstance knows that by a certain age wood will do whatever it wants to do. And that is why it's a constant point of vigilance and maintenance involved with that. And that is the nature of these older homes that we contend with. To start with, this particular home has a distinctive, or had a distinctive, if not unique, roof form, particularly with respect to its overhangs. And it is quite obvious that this project that we're looking at here, or dealing with this evening, is no longer a simple re-roof job. Due to actions taken, some may be ill-conceived, some may be ill-advised, the renovation plan has gone south. This is not a new structure. This is not a new home coming into a historic district. It's not necessary for us to be looking at a conformance issue to other standards that exist within that neighborhood. The photo record provided, gentlemen, thank you very much, is very nice. And I wish that in some other cases and other projects that we reviews, photo records would be just as extensive and well presented. However, it's really not germane to the case because we're not matching anything in the neighborhood. We're dealing with an existing historic structure. To a degree, factors of cost, practicality, and constructability have every bearing on a renovation or construction project. And difficult issues in these areas must be resolved for success. And in a typical nature, if they cannot be resolved, typically a project is deemed a no-go and it's not going in any particular direction. I don't believe this evening that a significant case has been made for the removal of a significant feature of a contributing structure. And that requesting an after-the-fact approval of such is tantamount to accepting guilt. I personally believe that our only real course of action at this point in time is to request and actually require that the applicants return this building back to its former form. That is all I have to say.
And just to make sure we're all understanding, if we were to suggest that it be rebuilt to its original conditions, we can't at this point say that the overhang can be matching, just to make sure.
Kamaria Pettis-Mackle from the City Attorney's Office. So this is before you for certificate of appropriateness to a modification of the roof based on their proposal. So in forming your motion would be to approve or deny what what they're proposing.
Okay. Now, how they go forward, bringing this thing back is another matter. But right now, we have the case of do we or do we not approve this modification?
That's correct.
Correct. Other than that, there's no condition.
Correct.
I agree with what you said, 100%. Contractors run into poor working conditions daily, and they have to work around them. They have to figure out ways to achieve the job working around the conditions that they're given. And in this particular case, I see conditions on one side of the property, not all four.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand some of the some of what we heard tonight as far as trying to back up what they're asking for, but at this point, unfortunately, it's after the fact, and I think there probably should have been, could have been a lot of other alternative methods explored and looked at that would have achieved a better result.
In many respects, I think that, at least from my point of view, if this came before us back when this whole project started, February, March, or whatever the time frame might have been, with a request for this modification, I don't know if we would have approved it then.
This home's unique.
That
Yes, it
really
is.
has
Very
no,
unique.
that really has no bearing on tonight's discussion. I really feel like we should be very careful about what we tread on here, because we can talk about this and just go on and on and on about what this could mean, but the issue here tonight is whether or not we agree that they should be approved for this modification after the fact.
As requested today.
Correct.
When it occurred and how it occurred is not a concern to us at this point. It's truly about, does the 2 feet reduction on either side work with the design for this house and for the Seminole Heights and the historic district? And if it does, why? And if it doesn't, why not?
Agreed.
And just to add in my 2 cents as to why I agree with Commissioner Sutton, I don't think we heard a strong enough case here to support the request. Historic districts, for the most part, generally do not have cookie cutter houses. And, we often, we're here to nurture the fact that they have very individual sort of notions to each property. And it is very apparent that this property was unique by the very fact that there were 20 houses shown out of, I can't even remember how many houses are actually in the district, is actually quite a small number, I think, in terms of percentage of houses in the district. I don't have those numbers, so I can't give you that for sure. But in understanding the historic districts here in the city of Tampa, we oversee 3 of them on this commission, as well as individual historic properties. And each one of them has a unique feature. be it an overhang, a particular type of detail, a roof slope, particular windows and how they relate to one another. They're all unique, and that's why we love our historic districts, and that's why there is a great desire in those communities to preserve what exists. And I just can't support the modification that you know, whether or not it was after the fact, for that reason. The uniqueness has been destroyed, I think, of this particular property.
Commissioner Boyd?
I have no additional comment.
I would tend to agree with my fellow commissioners. The piece that made this house unique was the overhangs. That was one of the delineating kind of pieces of details and factors within this house. And as you've kind of shown, even with the photos that you presented, even though there are some houses with conditions that are similar, each house was different. And the piece that made this house different was that overhangs. I think there are multiple ways we could look at this overhang dimensions and conditions to where it could relate back to, you know, what is historic and not drastically change the entire look of the house. And for that, I think this proposal does not match the intentions of making sure that this property stays to its historic nature. If a commissioner is ready to make a motion, I just want to make sure that regardless of if it's for a approval or denial, make sure that we're clear on the reasons, just for the record.
I move to deny a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in ARC 21-305 for the property located at 5610 North Swanee Avenue, because based upon the finding of fact, the proposed project is inconsistent with the Seminole Heights design guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons. Per the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved, and the removal of historic materials or alterations of the features and spaces that characterize the property shall be avoided, and this was not completed. In addition, the distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a historic property shall be preserved, and that was not preserved in this case. And in addition, exterior alterations shall not destroy the historic materials that characterize the property, and that was not followed in this case.
I'll second that.
Are you adding, Commissioner Boyd, information regarding the local standards as well?
I'm happy to.
That was on, there's information from the Seminole Heights Design Guidelines on page 4 and 5 of the staff report.
In addition, it is not permissible per the Seminole Heights Design Guidelines to alter an original roof line, to replace the roofing with a material which is not characteristic, to add soffits that are not original, or to replace soffits with alternate materials.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
to have all of your love night and day. Baby,